Margaret Wilson stood at her kitchen window, absently stirring her morning coffee as she gazed out at the maple tree in her backyard. The tree was showing its first hints of autumn gold, the same tree where her son Daniel had once built a rickety treehouse with his father 30 years ago. Her suburban Boston home felt especially empty this morning, the silence broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. She checked her phone again. No messages. It had been 6 weeks since she'd seen her grandchildren, Emma and Liam, ages 8 and 6. 6 weeks since the explosive argument with her daughter-in-law Vanessa that had ended with Margaret being told she was no longer welcome in their home. "You're undermining my parenting at every turn," Vanessa had said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I can't have you contradicting me in front of the kids anymore." The argument had escalated when Margaret suggested that perhaps Vanessa was being too strict about screen time. It seemed such a minor thing at the time. Margaret had simply allowed the children to watch an extra episode of their favorite show when she was babysitting. But it had been the final straw in what Margaret now recognized as years of building tension. The doorbell rang, pulling Margaret from her thoughts. She opened the door to find her longtime friend, Patricia. "I brought bagels," Patricia said, holding up a paper bag. "And I'm not taking no for an answer this time. You need to eat something." Over coffee at the kitchen table, Margaret finally broke down. "I don't even know what I did that was so terrible," she said, wiping away tears. "Daniel barely speaks to me anymore. He just says I need to respect Vanessa's boundaries." Patricia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Have you tried to apologize?" "I've called. I've texted. I've even written an actual letter," Margaret said. "Vanessa just says she needs space and that they'll be in touch when they're ready. But when will that be? Those are my grandchildren, Patty. I've been putting money into their college funds since the day they were born." Patricia's expression shifted slightly. "The college funds you set up? The ones in your name?" Margaret nodded. "I've been contributing $500 a month for each of them. It was supposed to be a surprise when they graduated high school." She paused, a thought occurring to her. "Daniel and Vanessa are counting on that money, aren't they? They've mentioned it in passing, assuming it would be there. But legally it's still your money," Patricia said carefully. I could use it for something else." Margaret finished the thought, an unfamiliar hardness entering her voice. "Maybe then they'd remember I exist." Patricia looked concerned. "Maggie, I'm not saying I'd spend it," Margaret interrupted, "but maybe I could restructure it, make it conditional." She stared out the window at the maple tree again. "All I want is to see my grandchildren." Later that afternoon, Margaret made a call to her financial advisor, James Harrington. She'd been working with him for years, ever since her husband Robert passed away, leaving her with a substantial life insurance policy and investment portfolio. "I want to make some changes to the educational trusts I've set up for my grandchildren," she told him, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. As she hung up the phone, Margaret felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed it aside. This wasn't about punishment, she told herself. This was about being recognized as an important part of Emma and Liam's lives. She'd spent her entire life putting family first, raising Daniel as a single mother after Robert died, helping financially when Daniel and Vanessa bought their first home, always being available to babysit at a moment's notice. All she wanted was to be treated with respect and to maintain her relationship with her grandchildren. If leveraging the college funds was what it took to get Vanessa's attention, then so be it. Margaret had no way of knowing that her decision would set in motion a series of events that would force everyone involved to confront painful truths about family, control, and the true meaning of doing what's best for the children caught in the middle. Margaret sat across from James Harrington in his downtown office, the city skyline visible through the large windows behind his desk. The financial advisor reviewed the documents in front of him with professional detachment, occasionally glancing up at Margaret over his reading glasses. "So, to confirm, Mrs. Wilson, you want to modify the terms of both educational trusts," James said, his tone neutral. Instead of direct distributions to Emma and Liam when they reach college age, you want to create conditions. Margaret nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. That's right. The funds will still be for their education, but I want to be the one who approves the distributions. And you understand that this gives you complete control over whether they receive this money, James continued. The approximately $116,000 in each account would be accessible only with your approval. Margaret felt a flutter of unease but pushed it away. I understand, but I'm not trying to be punitive. I just want... She paused, struggling to articulate her feelings without sounding vindictive. You want leverage, James finished for her, his expression carefully professional. I want to be part of my grandchildren's lives, Margaret corrected, colour rising in her cheeks. Is that so unreasonable? 6 weeks, James. It's been 6 weeks since I've seen them. Emma's birthday is next month. Am I just supposed to mail a card and pretend everything's fine? James removed his glasses and set them on the desk. Margaret, we've worked together for 15 years. You know I respect you immensely. But as your advisor, I need to ask if you've considered the long-term implications of this decision. Of course I have, Margaret replied more sharply than she intended. I'm not being impulsive. Family dynamics are complicated, James said gently. Have you tried family counseling? Maybe a neutral third party could help mediate. Daniel won't even take my calls most days, Margaret interrupted. And Vanessa has made it clear she doesn't want my interference. This is the only way I can think of to get them to listen. James nodded slowly, then turned to his computer. I'll draw up the paperwork. The modification process should take about 2 weeks. As she left the financial advisor's office, Margaret felt simultaneously empowered and troubled. Walking through Boston Common on her way to the parking garage, she watched families with young children enjoying the early autumn weather. A little girl about Emma's age was feeding ducks at the pond, her laughter carrying across the water. Margaret's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Daniel. Mom, Emma's asking about you. Would it be okay if I brought the kids over Saturday morning, just for an hour or so? Margaret stopped in the middle of the path, reading the message 3 times to make sure she understood. Her heart leapt at the prospect of seeing her grandchildren, but a part of her wondered if Daniel knew what she was planning with the college funds. No, she decided. There was no way he could know. She hadn't told anyone except Patricia and James. I'd love that, she texted back immediately. I can make those blueberry pancakes Emma likes. 3 dots appeared as Daniel typed his response. Great. 10 a.m. work. Vanessa has yoga at 9. So Vanessa wouldn't be coming. Margaret wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung. 10 a.m. is perfect. I can't wait to see you all. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She paced her living room, second-guessing her decision about the trusts. Was she using money to manipulate her family, or was she simply protecting her relationship with her grandchildren in the only way available to her? She pulled out old photo albums, flipping through pictures of Daniel growing up, then his wedding to Vanessa, then the births of Emma and Liam. In every photo, Margaret was there, supporting, loving, present. How had things gone so wrong? The memory of her last real conversation with Vanessa played in her mind. You don't respect my boundaries, Margaret, Vanessa had said, arms crossed defensively. You undermine my rules, you spoil the kids, and then I'm the bad guy. I'm just being a grandmother, Margaret had protested. Grandparents are supposed to spoil their grandchildren a little. There's spoiling, and then there's what you do, Vanessa had responded. The constant gifts, the sugar when I specifically ask you not to, staying up past bedtime. And then there's the comments. Mum's rules are different at Grandma's house. Don't tell your mother I let you have seconds. Do you know what message that sends? Margaret had been stunned by the list of grievances. I never meant to... It doesn't matter what you meant, Vanessa had cut her off. It matters what you do, and until you can respect our parenting decisions, I think it's better if we take a break. Now, staring at the family photos spread across her coffee table, Margaret wondered if changing the college funds would only confirm Vanessa's belief that she didn't respect boundaries. but then again, wasn't cutting her off from her grandchildren crossing a line too. By morning, Margaret had made up her mind. She would go through with modifying the trusts, but she would also make a genuine effort to understand Vanessa's perspective. Maybe this Saturday with the children could be a new beginning, a chance to demonstrate that she could follow their parents' rules. She called Patricia while making breakfast. "They're coming over tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Just Daniel and the kids." "That's wonderful," Patricia exclaimed. "Did you tell them about the trust changes?" Margaret hesitated. "No, and I'm not going to. At least not yet. I want to try to rebuild the relationship first." "So you're still going through with it?" "Yes," Margaret said firmly. "But I'm hoping I never have to use it as leverage. I'm hoping we can resolve this like adults." After hanging up, Margaret checked her email and found a message from James with the preliminary paperwork for the trust modifications. All she had to do was sign and return it. Her finger hovered over the print button. Once she signed these documents, there would be no going back. The college funds would become a powerful bargaining chip, one that could either bring her family back together or drive them apart forever. With a deep breath, Margaret clicked print. Saturday morning arrived with golden autumn sunshine streaming through Margaret's kitchen windows. She moved with nervous energy, preparing blueberry pancake batter and setting the table with the colorful plates the grandchildren loved. Everything had to be perfect. At 9:58 a.m., a car pulled into her driveway. Margaret's heart leapt when she saw Emma and Liam tumble out of the back seat, followed by Daniel. But her smile faltered when she spotted Vanessa emerging from the passenger side. "She changed her mind about yoga," Daniel explained quietly when Margaret opened the door, offering an apologetic look that sent a wave of unease through her. Emma rushed forward first. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Margaret's waist. "I missed you so much. Did you know I lost another tooth?" Liam followed more cautiously, eyeing his mother before giving Margaret a quick hug. "Hi, Grandma," he said softly. Vanessa stood at the threshold, arms crossed over her chest. "Hello, Margaret," she said, her tone civil but cool. "I'm so glad you all could come," Margaret said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "I've just made pancake batter. The kids can help me cook them." "Actually," Vanessa interjected, "the children already had breakfast, and we need to talk before they go play." Margaret felt her stomach tighten, but nodded. "Of course. Why don't you two go look at the new puzzle I got for you in the living room? We'll be right there." Once the children were out of earshot, Vanessa didn't waste time. "Daniel received a call from James Harrington's office yesterday," she said, her eyes locked on Margaret's. "Apparently, there was some confusion about paperwork for the kids' college funds, and they wanted to confirm some details with him as the children's father." Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. "I see," she managed. "Imagine our surprise," Vanessa continued, her voice controlled but tight with anger, "when we discovered you're changing the terms of the educational trusts you set up, trusts you've repeatedly told us would be there for Emma and Liam's future." Daniel stepped forward, his expression pained. "Mom, what's going on?" "James wouldn't give me specifics because you're the trustee, but he seemed concerned." Margaret glanced toward the living room, where the children were audibly chattering about the puzzle. "Can we discuss this privately? In the kitchen?" Once in the kitchen, Margaret leaned against the counter, feeling cornered. "I was going to tell you," she began. "When?" Vanessa demanded. "After the paperwork was finalized? After you had complete control over money we've been counting on for our children's education?" "It's still for their education," Margaret insisted. "I'm not taking the money away." "But you're making it conditional," Daniel said, his voice low with disappointment. "Aren't you?" Margaret looked at her son, seeing both the little boy she'd raised and the man who now stood before her, judging her. "I just wanted to be part of their lives again," she said, her voice wavering. 6 weeks, Daniel. 6 weeks without seeing them, without knowing what's happening in their lives. "So this is blackmail," Vanessa said flatly. "No," Margaret protested. "It's leverage. To ensure I have a relationship with my grandchildren." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made Margaret's heart ache. "Mom, do you hear yourself? You're using money to force us to let you see the kids on your terms, as opposed to cutting me out of their lives on your terms," Margaret countered, finding her resolve. "What was I supposed to do? You barely return my calls. Vanessa has made it clear I'm not welcome in your home, because you don't respect our boundaries," Vanessa exclaimed, then lowered her voice, glancing toward the living room. "We took a step today, coming here. I was willing to try again, to see if we could establish some ground rules that everyone could live with. And now I find out you've been planning this. Manipulation behind our backs." Margaret felt tears threatening and blinked them away. "I'm sorry the timing worked out this way. I truly am. But please try to understand, I felt helpless. Those children mean everything to me." "They're our children," Daniel said firmly. "Ours to raise as we see fit. We've never denied that you're their grandmother or that you should be in their lives. We just asked for respect of our parenting decisions." Margaret looked between them, suddenly seeing the situation through their eyes. Had she really been so blind to how her actions appeared? "I never meant to undermine you," she said softly. "But you did," Vanessa replied, "consistently. And now, instead of working on that issue, you've created an entirely new problem by threatening their financial future." "I wasn't threatening." "What would you call it?" Daniel interrupted. "Making the money conditional on having access to the kids." "That's a threat, Mom. Plain and simple." A small voice from the doorway made them all turn. "Are you fighting because of us?" Emma asked, her lower lip trembling. Liam stood beside her, eyes wide with concern. Vanessa immediately went to the children, crouching down to their level. "No, sweetie. Grown-ups sometimes have disagreements, but it's not because of you. Why don't we make those pancakes after all?" Margaret suggested, desperate to salvage the visit. "I know you already had breakfast, but maybe we could make them for lunch instead." She looked to Vanessa and Daniel for approval, the irony of the moment not lost on her. Here she was, checking with the parents before offering something to the children. Exactly what she should have been doing all along. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded slightly. "That would be fine. For lunch." The next hour passed in an uneasy truce. Margaret showed the children how to ladle batter onto the griddle, carefully monitoring the heat and making sure they stayed safe. She was hyper-aware of Vanessa watching her every move, and she made a conscious effort to defer to the parents at every opportunity. "Can I flip it now, Grandma?" Liam asked eagerly. "What do you think, Vanessa?" Margaret asked. "Is he old enough to try with supervision?" A flicker of surprise crossed Vanessa's face, followed by thoughtful consideration. "You can try once, Liam, but let Grandma hold your hand on the spatula." As the children ate their pancakes, Daniel pulled Margaret aside. "We need to resolve this trust situation," he said quietly. "Whatever issues we have as a family, using money as a bargaining chip isn't the answer." Margaret nodded slowly. "I see that now. I'll call James on Monday and cancel the changes." "Thank you," Daniel said, genuine relief in his voice. But as Margaret watched her family around the table, the grandchildren she adored, the son she'd raised alone, the daughter-in-law she'd never quite connected with, she couldn't help wondering if simply reverting the trusts would be enough. The underlying issues remained unaddressed. The trust modification had been a symptom, not the disease itself. "I think we should consider family counseling," she said suddenly, surprising herself almost as much as Daniel. "All of us. To learn how to communicate better." Daniel studied her face as if searching for an ulterior motive. Finding none, he nodded. "I'll talk to Vanessa about it." As the family prepared to leave an hour later, Margaret knelt to hug her grandchildren goodbye. "When will we see you again, Grandma?" Emma asked. Margaret looked up at Vanessa, refusing to make promises she couldn't keep. "That's something your mom and dad and I need to figure out together," she said carefully. "But I love you both very much, and I'll always be your grandmother." As their car pulled away, Margaret stood in her doorway, feeling both defeated and strangely hopeful. The day hadn't gone as planned, far from it, but perhaps it had gone as needed. Sometimes, she reflected, confrontations were necessary to clear the air before healing could begin. The week following the confrontation was the quietest Margaret had experienced in years. True to her word, she had called James first thing Monday morning to cancel the trust modifications. His relief was palpable even over the phone. "I think that's a wise decision, Margaret," he'd said. "Family relationships are too precious to risk." Now, sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Elena Winter's family therapy practice, Margaret found herself second-guessing her decision to suggest counseling. The sterile office, with its muted grey walls and generic landscape paintings, did little to calm her nerves. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, while Daniel had texted that he and Vanessa were running a few minutes late. Margaret picked up a magazine from the coffee table, flipping through it without registering any of the content. What if this made things worse? What if Vanessa used the session to list all of Margaret's failings as a grandmother? What if the therapist took Vanessa's side? The door opened and Daniel and Vanessa walked in. Daniel offered a tight smile, while Vanessa simply nodded in acknowledgement. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mrs. Wilson, a woman with silver-streaked dark hair, appeared in the doorway to the inner office. "And you must be Daniel and Vanessa. I'm Dr. Winters. Please come in." The therapist's office was warmer than the waiting room, with comfortable seating arranged in a semicircle and soft lighting that created a more intimate atmosphere. Dr. Winters gestured for them to sit wherever they felt comfortable. Margaret chose an armchair, while Daniel and Vanessa sat together on the small sofa. "First, I want to thank all of you for coming today," Dr. Winters began, her voice calm and measured. "It takes courage to seek help when family relationships become strained. Before we dive in, I'd like to establish some ground rules. This is a safe space where everyone gets a chance to speak without interruption. We're not here to assign blame, but to understand each other's perspectives and find a path forward. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?" They all nodded in agreement. "Good. Now, Margaret, since you were the one who suggested counseling, would you like to start by sharing what brought us here today?" Margaret took a deep breath. "I made a mistake," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "A serious one. I was hurt when Vanessa and Daniel limited my contact with my grandchildren, and I tried to use the college funds I'd established as leverage to see them again." Dr. Winters nodded, her expression neutral. "And how do you feel about that decision now?" "Ashamed," Margaret admitted. "I've already reversed the changes to the trusts, but I realize the bigger issue is why we got to that point in the first place. I need to understand what I've been doing wrong as a grandmother, because I never meant to undermine Daniel and Vanessa's parenting." Dr. Winters turned to the couple. "Daniel, Vanessa, how did you feel when you learned about Margaret's plan for the college funds?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Betrayed. Mom has always been generous with financial support, but this felt like she was weaponizing that generosity." "And angry," Vanessa added. "It confirmed what I've felt for years, that Margaret doesn't respect our boundaries or our authority as parents." Dr. Winters made a note on her pad. "Let's talk about those boundaries. Vanessa, can you give a specific example of a boundary you feel Margaret has crossed?" Vanessa sat up straighter. "There are so many. Giving the kids sugary snacks when we've specifically asked her not to. Buying extravagant gifts without consulting us first. Telling them they don't have to follow the same rules at her house. Making comments like, 'Your mom is too strict,' or 'Don't tell your parents I let you stay up late.'" Margaret flinched at each example, a flush creeping up her neck. "I never said Vanessa was too strict. Not to the children," she protested. "But you implied it," Daniel interjected. "Mom, you roll your eyes when Vanessa sets limits. The kids pick up on that." Dr. Winters held up a hand. "Let's pause here. Margaret, how do you feel hearing these examples?" Margaret stared at her hands, twisted together in her lap. I didn't realize how my actions were being perceived. I thought I was just being a fun grandmother, creating special memories." "At the expense of our parenting," Vanessa said, her voice tight. "Let's try something," Dr. Winters suggested. "Margaret, can you try to express back to Vanessa what you're hearing from her?" Not defending yourself, just acknowledging her perspective. Margaret nodded slowly. Vanessa feels that I undermine her authority as a parent by not following the rules she's established for Emma and Liam. She believes I create situations where she has to be the bad guy who enforces rules, while I get to be the fun grandma who breaks them. She paused, swallowing hard. And she's right. A flicker of surprise crossed Vanessa's face at the admission. That's very insightful, Margaret, Dr. Winters said. Now I'd like to shift focus a bit. Daniel, you've been relatively quiet. As someone in the middle, both Margaret's son and Vanessa's husband, father to Emma and Liam, what's your perspective on all this? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Margaret had seen countless times throughout his life when he was stressed. I feel torn, he admitted. I understand why Vanessa is frustrated. We work hard to create consistency for the kids, and Mom's approach undermines that. But I also see how much Mom loves them and how much they love her. He turned to Margaret. Mom, when Dad died, you became both parents to me. You were always there, always supportive. Maybe too supportive sometimes, but I never doubted your love. Margaret felt tears welling up. And now I've damaged that trust. The trust issue isn't just about the college funds, Daniel continued. It's about trusting you to respect our decisions as parents, even when you disagree with them. Dr. Winters nodded. That's a crucial insight, Daniel. Trust in family relationships works on multiple levels. She turned to Vanessa. Vanessa, can you help me understand what an ideal relationship with Margaret would look like from your perspective? What would need to change for you to feel comfortable with her having more time with the children? Vanessa was quiet for a moment, considering. I would need to know that she'll follow our guidelines consistently, not just when we're watching. And I'd need her to stop undermining us with comments or facial expressions that suggest we're being too strict. That seems reasonable, Margaret said softly. I can do that. It's not just about following rules, Vanessa continued, warming to the topic. It's about respecting that Daniel and I are the parents. We make the decisions about Emma and Liam's upbringing, even if those decisions are different from what Margaret would choose. Dr. Winters made another note. Margaret, how does that sound to you? Difficult, Margaret admitted honestly, but necessary. I never meant to cause harm with my actions, but intention doesn't negate impact. I see that now. This is excellent progress for a first session, Dr. Winters said. I'd like to suggest a small exercise for our next meeting. Margaret, I'd like you to write down 3 specific ways you can demonstrate respect for Daniel and Vanessa's parenting decisions. And Vanessa, I'd like you to write down 3 specific ways Margaret could still create special memories with her grandchildren while staying within your boundaries. As they scheduled their next appointment and prepared to leave, Margaret felt emotionally drained, but also lighter somehow. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope that they might find a way forward. In the parking lot, an awkward silence fell as they stood by their respective cars. Thank you both for coming today, Margaret said finally. I know it wasn't easy. Daniel nodded. It's a start, Mom. Vanessa hesitated, then said, The kids have a soccer game this Saturday. If you'd like to come watch, they'd love to see you there. The simple invitation felt like an olive branch. I'd love that, Margaret replied, careful not to appear too eager. Just text me the details. As she drove home, Margaret reflected on all that had been said and all that had been left unsaid. She had made mistakes, serious ones, but so had Daniel by not standing up for her relationship with her grandchildren sooner. And perhaps Vanessa's boundaries had been too rigid at times. But blame wouldn't move them forward. Only understanding and compromise could do that. Margaret realized she had a choice. She could cling to her idea of what grandmothering should look like, or she could adapt to what her family needed from her. For the first time since the conflict began, Margaret felt ready to choose the latter. The college funds had never been about control. They had been about securing her grandchildren's future, and the best way to be part of that future was to respect their parents in the present. The bleachers at Oakdale Elementary's soccer field were packed with parents and family members, all bundled against the crisp October air. Margaret arrived 20 minutes early, a thermos of hot chocolate in hand, a peace offering of sorts. She scanned the crowd, finally spotting Daniel waving from the middle section. As she made her way up the metal steps, Margaret noticed Vanessa was already there, setting up a blanket across the bleachers. A small cooler sat at her feet, likely filled with snacks and drinks for the children after the game. "I brought hot chocolate," Margaret said tentatively, holding up the thermos. "Is that okay?" "I remembered how the kids always get cold during their fall games." Vanessa hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That's thoughtful, thank you." Margaret settled in beside them, maintaining a respectful distance. "Which team are they on this year? I see they have new uniforms." "The Oakdale Eagles," Daniel replied, pointing to the children warming up in royal blue jerseys. "Emma's playing defense this season, and Liam finally got moved up from the junior league. He's beside himself with excitement." "They've grown so much," Margaret murmured, watching her grandchildren running drills with their teammates. Emma's long brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, while Liam's face was a picture of intense concentration as he practiced passing the ball. "Emma!" Vanessa called, waving. "Grandma's here." Emma looked up, her face lighting with surprise and delight. She nudged Liam and pointed toward the bleachers. Both children waved enthusiastically before their coach called them back to attention. "Thank you for inviting me," Margaret said softly. Vanessa nodded, her eyes still on the children. "They've missed you." The game began, and for a while conversation was replaced by cheers and encouragement. Margaret found herself naturally following Vanessa's lead, cheering when she cheered, respecting the moments of quiet focus. When Liam took a hard fall on the field, Margaret instinctively half rose from her seat, but a quick glance at Vanessa's calm demeanor made her settle back down. "He's tougher than he looks," Vanessa commented, noticing Margaret's concern. "Daniel was the same way at that age." "Yes, he was," Margaret agreed, memories flooding back, always coming home with skinned knees and tales of adventure. The shared recollection created a moment of connection between them. It was small, but it was something. At halftime, Emma and Liam raced over to the bleachers, flushed with exertion and excitement. "Did you see my block, Grandma?" Emma asked breathlessly. "Coach says I have the best defensive stance in the whole team." "I did see it. You were amazing," Margaret replied, her heart swelling with pride. She glanced at Vanessa, who gave a slight nod of approval. "And, Liam, that pass you made in the first quarter was spectacular." "Can we have some hot chocolate?" Liam asked, eyeing the thermos. Margaret looked to Vanessa. "Is that all right? I don't want to spoil their energy for the second half." The simple act of deferring to Vanessa's judgment didn't go unnoticed. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. "Small cups should be fine. They've been running hard." After the game, a narrow victory for the Eagles, they all walked to the parking lot together. An awkward silence fell as they reached their cars. Would you like to come over for dinner?" Vanessa asked suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just pizza. The kids always want to celebrate after a win." Margaret was so surprised by the invitation that she momentarily lost her voice. "I'd love that," she finally managed. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Daniel said with a smile that reminded Margaret of happier times. The Wilson family home was a charming colonial in a quiet suburb, with a yard that showed signs of active children, a soccer ball here, a bike there. Inside, family photos lined the walls, including several featuring Margaret that she hadn't realized they'd kept displayed during their estrangement. As they settled around the dining table with pizza and salad, the conversation flowed more easily than Margaret had dared to hope. The children eagerly filled her in on everything she'd missed: Emma's science project on butterflies, Liam's new obsession with astronomy, a family trip to the coast in September. "Mom, would you mind helping Emma with her math homework after dinner?" Daniel asked casually. "She's struggling with fractions, and you were always better at explaining math than I am." "I'd be happy to," Margaret replied, careful not to appear too eager. "If that's okay with you, Vanessa." Vanessa nodded. "Actually, that would be helpful. I need to help Liam finish his reading log." After dinner, Margaret sat with Emma at the kitchen table, patiently working through fraction problems. She was conscious of keeping her voice down and sticking strictly to the methods Emma's teacher was using, rather than suggesting the shortcuts she'd taught Daniel years ago. "You're doing so well, Emma," she encouraged. "Let's try one more, and then we'll be done." From the living room, Margaret could hear Liam reading aloud to Vanessa, his small voice carefully sounding out the more challenging words. The domestic normalcy of the moment brought tears to her eyes, which she quickly blinked away before Emma could notice. Later, as the children got ready for bed, Daniel pulled Margaret aside. "Thanks for being so respectful of Vanessa's boundaries today," he said quietly. She noticed. "I'm trying," Margaret replied. "The therapy session helped me understand her perspective better." "It helped us understand yours too," Daniel admitted. "I should have been more proactive in maintaining your relationship with the kids. I was caught in the middle and took the path of least resistance." "We all made mistakes," Margaret said, "but we're finding our way back, aren't we?" When it came time for good-night hugs, Margaret waited for a cue from Vanessa before approaching the children's bedrooms. 5 minutes each," Vanessa said with a small smile. "They'll try to stretch it longer if you let them." Margaret cherished those 10 minutes, listening to Emma's detailed explanation of her butterfly project and Liam's excited theories about black holes. She was careful not to make any promises about future visits or plans without consulting their parents first. As she prepared to leave, Vanessa walked her to the door while Daniel put the last of the dishes in the dishwasher. "I have something to say," Vanessa began, her tone serious but not unfriendly. "I've been thinking a lot since our therapy session. While I still believe you crossed boundaries, I recognize that I may have been too rigid at times." Margaret listened, surprised by the admission. "The children need their grandmother," Vanessa continued. "And contrary to what you might think, I've always valued your presence in their lives. I just needed it to be on terms that didn't undermine our parenting." "I understand that now," Margaret said softly. "And I want you to know that I've been doing a lot of reflection too. The college funds, that was wrong of me. It came from a place of desperation, but it was still wrong." Vanessa nodded. "We've already moved past that. James called Daniel yesterday to confirm everything was back to the original arrangement." "It is," Margaret assured her. "The trusts are secure for Emma and Liam's education. No strings attached." "Thank you." Vanessa hesitated, then added, "We have another therapy session scheduled for next week. I think we should keep it. We've made progress, but there's still work to do." "I agree completely," Margaret said. "And in the meantime," Vanessa continued, "we have Emma's birthday next weekend. We're having a small party at the house on Saturday afternoon. Nothing elaborate, just family and a few close friends. We'd like you to come if you're available." The invitation, so casually extended, meant more to Margaret than Vanessa could possibly know. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. As she drove home that evening, Margaret reflected on the day's events. It hadn't been perfect. There had been moments of tension, awkward silences, careful navigation of potentially sensitive topics. But it had been real. And real was better than perfect. The college funds that had nearly torn them apart now seemed like such a minor issue compared to the relationships at stake. Money could be replaced, family could not. At home, Margaret pulled out her notebook to work on the exercise Dr. Winters had assigned. 3 specific ways she could demonstrate respect for Daniel and Vanessa's parenting decisions. Always check with them before offering treats or activities to the children. Support their rules consistently, even when they differ from what I would choose. Express any concerns privately, never in front of the children. She paused, then added a fourth. 4. Remember that respecting their authority as parents is the greatest gift I can give my grandchildren. Margaret closed the notebook and gazed at the family photos on her mantel. The trust she had broken would take time to rebuild. The wounds would take time to heal. But today had shown her that reconciliation was possible, not through leveraging money or power, but through humble recognition of mistakes and willingness to change. Outside her window, the maple tree stood strong against the evening sky, its leaves a brilliant tapestry of red and gold. Like the tree, their family had deep roots that could weather the changing seasons. They were bent, but not broken, and with care and patience they would grow stronger at the very places where they had once been weak. For the first time in months, Margaret slept peacefully, without the weight of estrangement pressing on her heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to demonstrate that she had truly learned from her mistakes. And that, she realized, was all any of them could ask for, the chance to do better today than they had done yesterday. 3 months had passed since that pivotal soccer game, and the Wilson family had settled into a new rhythm. Margaret sat in her sunroom, surrounded by the soft glow of holiday lights, addressing Christmas cards at a small writing desk. Outside, a gentle snow was falling, transforming her backyard into a winter wonderland. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times, reminding Margaret that she needed to finish the cards before heading over to Daniel and Vanessa's home for their weekly Sunday dinner, a tradition that had emerged organically over the past several weeks. As she sealed the last envelope, Margaret's gaze fell on the framed photo that now occupied a place of honor on her desk, a candid shot from Emma's birthday party in October. In it, Margaret and Vanessa were working together to light the candles on Emma's butterfly-themed cake, their heads bent close in concentration, while Emma watched with delight. Daniel had captured the moment perfectly, a visual testament to how far they had come. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been 6 more therapy sessions with Dr. Winters, some more challenging than others. There had been difficult conversations, painful admissions, and moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. But they had persevered, committed to rebuilding what had been broken. Margaret had learned to check her impulses, to ask before acting, to respect the boundaries that Vanessa and Daniel set for their children. In turn, Vanessa had gradually relaxed some of her more rigid rules, allowing Margaret space to develop her own special relationship with Emma and Liam without feeling threatened. The phone rang, interrupting Margaret's reflections. It was Daniel. "Hey, Mom! I'm calling about dinner tonight. Vanessa and I were wondering if you could come over a bit early. There's something we'd like to discuss with you before the kids get back from their play dates." A flicker of anxiety passed through Margaret, but she quickly dismissed it. Their relationship had strengthened enough that she no longer immediately assumed the worst. "Of course. Would 4 o'clock work?" "Perfect. See you then." Margaret arrived at Daniel and Vanessa's home promptly at 4, a basket of freshly baked cranberry muffins in hand, made with honey instead of sugar, respecting Vanessa's preference for limiting the children's refined sugar intake. These small accommodations had become second nature to Margaret now, no longer feeling like concessions, but rather expressions of respect. Daniel answered the door, greeting her with a warm hug. "Come in, Mom. It's freezing out there." Inside, the house was decorated for the holidays, with tasteful evergreen garlands and twinkling lights. The scent of pine mingled with something savory, simmering in the kitchen. Vanessa emerged from the home office, a folder in her hands. "Margaret, thanks for coming early. Would you like some tea? We just got a new chai blend I think you'd enjoy." "That sounds lovely," Margaret replied, still marveling at how their interactions had evolved from tense politeness to genuine warmth. Once they were settled in the living room with steaming mugs of tea, Daniel and Vanessa exchanged a look that Margaret had come to recognize as their silent communication. "So," Daniel began, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." Margaret nodded, keeping her expression open and receptive. Vanessa placed the folder on the coffee table between them. "It's about the children's college funds." Margaret felt her stomach tighten involuntarily. The college funds had been a sensitive subject, one they had largely avoided discussing directly since the confrontation months ago. "I've kept everything as it was," she said quickly. "The trusts are intact, no conditions." "We know," Daniel assured her. "That's not what this is about." Vanessa opened the folder, revealing several printed documents. After everything that happened, Daniel and I realized we've been too dependent on your financial support for the children's future. Not that we don't appreciate it, she added hastily, but we recognized it wasn't fair to place that burden entirely on you. It's never been a burden, Margaret protested. I want to help secure their future, and we're grateful for that, Daniel said, but we also need to take more responsibility ourselves. He pointed to the documents. We've set up our own college savings accounts for both kids. We're not contributing as much as you are. We can't match that right now, but we're putting away something every month. Margaret wasn't sure how to respond. Was this their way of declining her financial help after all the progress they'd made? Sensing her confusion, Vanessa continued, "We're not asking you to stop contributing to your trusts. Actually, we have a different proposal." She pulled out another document. "We'd like to create a joint trust arrangement, combining your funds with ours under a structure that gives all three of us equal authority." "Equal authority," Margaret echoed, trying to process what they were suggesting. Daniel nodded. "We've talked with James Harrington about it. The new arrangement would legally recognize what we've come to understand through therapy, that we're partners in the children's upbringing, each with important roles to play." "We all made mistakes," Vanessa admitted frankly. "I was too controlling. You crossed boundaries. Daniel avoided conflict, but we've grown from that experience. The joint trust would be symbolic as much as practical," Daniel explained. "A statement that we trust each other to act in Emma and Liam's best interests, now and in the future." Margaret felt tears welling in her eyes. After everything that had happened, they were offering her not just forgiveness, but a formal acknowledgement of her place in their family system. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to decide right now," Vanessa assured her. "We wanted to present the idea before the holidays, but there's plenty of time to think it over." Margaret shook her head. "I don't need time. This means more to me than you can possibly know." "Of course, I agree." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening and excited voices filling the entryway. Emma and Liam burst into the living room, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Grandma!" Liam exclaimed, rushing to give her a hug. "You're here early. Did you see the snow fort we built in the Petersons' yard? It's epic." "Not yet, but I'd love to hear all about it," Margaret replied, returning his embrace. Emma, now 9 and increasingly conscious of appearing grown up, offered a more restrained greeting. "Hi, Grandma. We didn't expect you until dinner." "Your parents invited me to come early," Margaret explained. "We were just finishing up some grown-up business." "Boring stuff," Daniel added with a wink. "Now who's ready to help with dinner?" "We're making lasagna from Great-Grandma Wilson's recipe." "Me!" Both children chorused. In the kitchen, they fell into an easy collaboration. Vanessa supervised Emma with the sauce, while Daniel helped Liam layer the pasta. Margaret prepared the garlic bread, occasionally offering tips, but careful not to overstep. "Grandma, can you tell us the story about when Dad was little and tried to make lasagna by himself?" Emma requested, giggling in anticipation of a tale she'd clearly heard before. Margaret glanced at Daniel, who nodded with a good-natured eye roll. "Well," she began, "your father was about Liam's age, and he was absolutely convinced he could surprise me with dinner." As she recounted the disastrous but hilarious cooking attempt that had ended with tomato sauce on the ceiling, Margaret observed the easy laughter shared between them all. This, she realized, was what family was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, but perfectly real. After dinner, as they gathered around the fireplace for a game of Scrabble, Emma and Liam teamed up with an adult each. Vanessa's phone chimed with a message. "It's my sister," she announced after checking it. "She just sent me the dates for the family reunion in Colorado this summer, July 15th through the 22nd. That's the same week as my medical conference," Daniel said with a frown. "I can't get out of presenting this year." Vanessa's disappointment was evident. "We can't miss the reunion. It's the first time in 5 years the entire family will be together, and my grandmother's 90th birthday celebration is the centerpiece." A brief silence fell over the room as they contemplated the scheduling conflict. Then Margaret spoke up. I could accompany Vanessa and the children, she suggested cautiously, if that would be helpful. 6 months ago, such an offer would have seemed presumptuous or even intrusive. But now, Vanessa's face lit up with genuine relief. That would be perfect, actually. The kids would love having you there, and an extra pair of hands for the long drive would make a huge difference. She turned to Daniel. What do you think? I think it's a great solution, he agreed. Mom's never been to Colorado, and you could show her all your favorite childhood places. It's settled then, Vanessa said with a smile directed at Margaret. We'll work out the details closer to the date. Later, as the evening wound down and Margaret prepared to leave, Vanessa pulled her aside while Daniel was upstairs helping the children get ready for bed. I wanted to thank you, Vanessa said quietly. Not just for the Colorado offer, but for everything these past few months. The way you've respected our boundaries, the effort you've put into therapy, how you've rebuilt trust with all of us. I should be thanking you, Margaret replied, for giving me another chance, for allowing me back into your lives. I know it wasn't easy after what I did. Vanessa shook her head. We all contributed to the problem, but look at where we are now. She hesitated, then added, You know, when I was growing up, my grandmother was my rock. My parents divorced when I was young, and spending time with her gave me stability. I want Emma and Liam to have that same kind of relationship with you. That means the world to me, Margaret said, deeply touched by the confession. Just promise me one thing, Vanessa continued, a hint of her old firmness returning. If you ever feel we're excluding you, or if I'm being too rigid again, talk to me directly. Don't let resentment build up, and definitely don't go changing any financial arrangements. Margaret laughed softly. I promise. Open communication from now on. And I promise to be more flexible, Vanessa added. Within reason. Within reason. Margaret agreed with a smile. Daniel came downstairs, interrupting their conversation. The kids are asking for Grandma to say good night. Go ahead, Vanessa encouraged. They won't settle down until they get their hugs. Upstairs, Margaret spent a few precious minutes with each grandchild, listening to their prayers and hopes for the coming week. With Emma, she discussed the book they were currently reading together, a chapter each Sunday during Margaret's visits. With Liam, she admired the progress on his model solar system, offering encouragement for his meticulous work. As she tucked the blankets around Liam, he asked sleepily, Grandma, are you happy now? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean, sweetheart? You seemed sad for a long time, he explained, with the straightforward perception of a child. But now you smile more. I am very happy, she assured him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. Being with you and Emma and your parents makes me happier than anything else in the world. Good, he mumbled, eyes already closing, because we're happier when you're here too. Driving home through the gently falling snow, Margaret reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From the painful separation to the ill-conceived plan with the college funds, through confrontation and therapy, to this new place of mutual respect and shared purpose, they had traversed an emotional landscape she would never have imagined possible. The college funds that had nearly destroyed their family had, ironically, become a symbol of their healing. The joint trust arrangement Daniel and Vanessa had proposed represented so much more than money. It was a tangible acknowledgement that all three adults had important roles to play in Emma and Liam's lives. As Margaret pulled into her driveway, she noticed the maple tree in her yard, now bare of leaves but strong against the winter sky. Its branches were laden with snow, yet they did not break under the weight. Instead, they seemed to embrace it, transformed into something new and beautiful by what might have been a burden. Like the tree, their family had endured its season of struggle and emerged stronger, more flexible, more resilient. The boundaries that had once felt like barriers now served as healthy frameworks within which their relationships could flourish. Inside her home, Margaret hung up her coat and noticed the blinking light on her answering machine. It was a message from Dr. Winters, confirming their final therapy session scheduled for later that week. a graduation of sorts from the intensive work they had been doing. Margaret smiled as she listened to the message. They had come so far, yet she knew their journey wasn't really ending. In many ways, it was just beginning. There would be other challenges, other disagreements, other moments when they would need to navigate differing perspectives and priorities, but now they had the tools and trust to face those moments together. On her refrigerator, held by a butterfly magnet Emma had made, was a calendar for the coming year. It was filled with notations, Sunday dinners, school events where Margaret would be in attendance, her birthday highlighted with the children's handwriting, the summer trip to Colorado, and weekend sleepovers carefully scheduled once a month. None of it was extravagant or extraordinary. There were no grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Just the quiet, consistent rhythm of family life, with its predictable patterns and reassuring routines. The very ordinariness of it was what made it so precious. Margaret made herself a cup of tea and settled into her favorite chair by the window, watching the snow continue to fall. The college funds that had once been her desperate attempt to maintain connection with her grandchildren were now just one thread in the rich tapestry of their shared lives. Important, but no longer essential to defining her role. What mattered now was not the financial security she could provide, but the emotional wealth they created together. The stories shared, the traditions maintained, the mutual respect demonstrated, the boundaries honored, the love expressed in 1,000 small ways every day. Tomorrow, she would begin helping Emma with her science fair project, with Vanessa's full blessing and within the parameters they had agreed upon together. Next weekend, she would take Liam to the planetarium, a special outing that Daniel had suggested. And in the summer, she would accompany Vanessa and the children to Colorado, forging new connections with another branch of their extended family tree. These were the true investments she was making now, investments of time, attention, patience, and respect. And unlike financial investments, the returns were immediate and immeasurable. The light in Emma's eyes when she mastered a difficult concept, the pride in Liam's voice when he shared his latest discovery, the growing ease in her conversations with Vanessa, the deepening bond with her son. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 9, its familiar chime echoing through the quiet house. Margaret set down her tea and picked up her phone to send a quick text to the family group chat they had created. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. The lasagna was delicious and the company even better. See you all next Sunday. Love, Mom, Grandma." Within moments, replies appeared. "Daniel, thanks for coming early. The paperwork is all set for our meeting with James on Tuesday." Vanessa, "Emma's already planning what chapter you'll read together next week." And then a string of heart emojis from Emma's supervised phone, followed by a voice message from Liam. "Good night, Grandma. Don't forget we need to finish my solar system before the Science Museum field trip." Margaret smiled as she set the phone aside. The college funds had never been about the money at all. They had been about securing her place in her grandchildren's future. What she understood now was that her place had never been in jeopardy. Not really. It had just needed to be negotiated with respect, defined with care, and maintained with love. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering everything in a clean, white blanket, a fitting metaphor for the fresh start they had all been given. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, Margaret Wilson was at peace. The funds that had almost torn them apart had, in the end, helped them find their way back to what truly mattered: each other.